now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergetics.com, where you can learn to become a medical intuitive counselor, or energy medicine practitioner. You can learn all of these things all from the comfort of your own home. It's also brought to you by soulhealer.com. Please do check out the Just Energy Radio webpage. That's www.justenergyradio.com, where, one, you can sign up for our weekly newsletter, and two, you can check out our over 5 years of excellent programming like you're listening to right now. So in this hour, we're going to be speaking with James O'Kahn about the lost technology of the Maya. You know, this is one of my favorite topics, so I'm looking forward to a lively discussion. But let me tell you a little bit about James, and we will get him on. James O'Kahn has pursued a lifelong passion for Maya archaeology. He has combined his unique professional engineering experience with the search for lost Maya technology. He has applied his diverse engineering talents to explore and investigate nearly inaccessible Maya sites located in the dense rainforest. Traveling by dugout canoe, hacking his way through the tangled jungle, while fighting off millions of insects and sleeping in tents, he was able to verify feats of Maya engineering and virtually reconstruct the mystery of the lost Maya technology. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, James O'Kahn. Hey, Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, and you, Doctor? How are you today?
I'm doing great. Lots of bugs, huh?
Well... Yes, there's lots of bugs and lots of other critters around, but actually with all the talk about snakes and jaguars and everything, it's the bugs that'll get you.
I'm hearing you. You know, I joke around, there's a lone mosquito somewhere in Japan, and it will fly across the ocean all the way to Texas just to sting me.
Well,
I don't know that I can do lots of bugs.
They have lots of friends down in the Yucatan.
I would just have to bring a case of bug spray or something. I don't know. So let's start here. You have a very impressive background in structural engineering. How did you become interested in the Maya and their technology? Well,
it started at an early age. I actually played in the Civil War trenches around my house in a suburb of Atlanta. That was covered in battlefield memorabilia, rusted guns, spent shot, etc. And, of course, we didn't think anything of it because it's always been there, right? It's like living in the castle. So that began my background in archaeology and history, and then I had really good teachers in high school that sort of gave me some more support and urged me to do more in those areas, and I did. And after college, I started traveling abroad, first to Spain, and then I realized that I went to the wrong place first. I should have gone down south of the border, and visited Mexico. So I did Mexico and British Honduras and Guatemala, and lived amongst the Maya cities that I've grown to love so well.
Cool. So I know we're going to be talking about the Maya, but wasn't there a culture that existed in Mesoamerica prior to the rise of Maya culture?
Right. The Olmecs were prior, and there were probably some prior to them, but the only evidence we have is of the Olmecs. They were just before the Maya, and they died out around 600 AD, and the Maya went on for another 300 years. They were almost parallel, and developed a little earlier, but they left them some of the notions of writing and of course how to vulcanize rubber, which was a big invention of the Mayas.
Now, why would primitive people need to vulcanize rubber?
Well, they discovered that rubber did come, and rubber is an indigenous plant to the Yucatan, and they found that they can make these really good bouncy rubber balls by mixing the juice of the morning glory vine, which had sulfides in it, like Mr. Goodyear found with sulfur and rubber, and they mixed the juice of the morning glory vine with the latex that they got from the trees, and produced very good rubber balls. And the ball game was a big part of their life. So the rubber ball that had a lot of liveliness to it was a very big, played a very big part in their life.
And I'll just put out there for just in case people are wondering, yes, rubber does come from trees.
Yes.
Like rubber trees. Well, when you think of rubber, you think of the tires on your car. And how could that possibly come from a tree?
Well, they used to.
Because we're so, but we're so separated from that whole process of where does it come from?
Exactly. But rubber now mostly comes from the rubber in tires, anyway, comes from petroleum products. And the rubber that was on the first cars until, let's say, the 40s was the natural rubber that was vulcanized and made into a harder material that could take the wear and tear of the road.
So other than these balls, was it used for something else? I mean, part of my mind thinks, well, maybe it had some kind of sealing properties. If you put the rubber on the outside of a canoe, it would make it waterproof. I mean, did they use it for any other stuff? Yes, they did. They used the waterproof clothing, to waterproof the shoes. They used it as a fuse. When I say they used the copal, which is an incense, to burn when they had rites or rituals, and copal was very hard to ignite, so they would stick into the ball of incense, the copal, a rubber figure, and the rubber would light up right away, and it would burn down to the ball of incense and ignite the incense that way. That was another way they used it, and they used it for slingshots actually. So they had a lot of uses that besides making rubber balls. Okay. Well, I was like, okay, they came up with this whole thing just to, I mean, I understand that, playing that ball game was very big, very, we say important ritual. It might have been like going to see the Spurs and the Jets, or not, I don't even know if those are basketball teams. The Knicks. How right. Sports-minded I am. The Knicks go right. Play at Madison Square Garden or something. Right. They drank a lot of beer. It was fun. Okay. I mean, have you studied, and I'm not really going to go a whole lot of depth into the Olmec, but I mean, have you studied, the Olmec very much? And can you make a correlation between how much the Maya actually borrowed from the Olmec? Yes, I could give you the big items. I can't recite all the items because I don't think anybody knows, because the Olmec did not have a writing system, so they couldn't leave any records. The Maya had a writing system. The main records that we have are carved in stone. The rest of them were in books which the conquistadors burned. There's only 4 Maya paper books left. The rest of the word, the history, etc., came from the carvings of glyphs on the monuments. But going back to the Olmecs, there was a 260-day ceremonial calendar. There is a methodology for lapidary, for carving a very hard stone of jadeite. The Olmec preferred the blue stone,
and the Maya preferred the greenstone. And I mentioned the balls, etc. But those are the major elements that they did copy or learn from the Olmec.
So that's interesting. So the Olmec are the ones that actually came out with the Tulkan, I can never say that name, calendar, the 260-day sacred calendar.
Right. Which is still being kept today by the Maya survivors. Oh, well, it's part of their heritage.
So were the Maya the ones that came up with the Hob calendar, the 360, I love saying this, the 360 plus 5-day calendar, was that their addition to their timekeeping?
Well, yes, that's actually during the 65 days is actually the time for the Earth to make one axis, one rotation of the sun. So that was a natural, because the Maya were extremely excellent astronomers and very, very accurate, and I mean down to seconds. In the when we compare today's contemporary measurement of the Earth rotation, the rotation and the axis around the circle around the sun, they're within seconds of our measurements. Same thing with Mercury and Venus and Mars. Unbelievable accuracy without optical instruments, but with a higher, really great development of high mathematics. So they were very accurate.
I mean, I think it's interesting how the ancients were able to keep track of time. I mean, there's talk that they understood about the precession of the equinoxes and all of this stuff, and I'm like, but it's only moving 1 degree every 72 years. That's like seeing Halley's Comet twice in your lifetime. It doesn't happen very often. You know, and
the only person I know is Mark Twain. He was born under Halley's Comet and died under Halley's Comet. So, yes, that always amazes me. One of their greatest astronomical feats was calculating the 25,600 year total precession of the Earth's wobble. How many generations did it take to calculate that? Now we get the Maya were the longest lived civilization on Earth, almost 3,000 years. That's a long time. So that would still only give you what have we got there? We'd only have a part of the precession. I didn't make the calculation number of degrees, but in that period of time, they wouldn't have had one full circuit. They would have only had basically a fifth. So they whatever they figured, they used a lot of time. They had a lot of time. They had 2,000 years before their classic period of calculations, observations, and just figuring out the amount of time it took for one precession. Then they broke into 5 different parts, 5,126 years apart, and developed the beginning of the 13 Baktuns. That's what we're talking about in the calendar round, which ends on, of course, December 21st. And they cycle back in time, as they would do, back and forth, to BC 3114, August the 11th. So,
all right, but do you really believe that date?
Which date?
The December 21st, 2012, or the August 13th, 14th, 3114? I mean, do you really?
Well,
because
they're real dates, but the thing is, they're just place marks in time. They were not, in my opinion, and the opinion of most of the archaeologists and astronomers, which I know, that's a place mark in time that ends the 13th Baktun. But the calendar will go on. There's been recent discoveries, I'm sure you read about them, at Chaltun in Guatemala. It has 4 more Baktuns, which takes it another 1,124 years into the future, beyond the next December 21st. So I, all along, even before this discovery came out just last week, I had calculated that the cycle would restart again. It would go from 13.0.0.0 to 0.0.01, and we start all over again.
So are they saying that, I don't remember what that placeholder is called, but where the 13 is, that it's actually going to go up to 20? I mean, because I've heard that theory before also, that, when we hit the, 12.12.12 point whatever, 20 point whatever, because they got those weird last couple of numbers, that
Right.
It's really not going to roll over to 0, but that it's actually going to go up to 14, 15, and higher numbers.
The 20 is a logical number because 20 was their base. Then the decimal base, not 10 like we use, but 20. And 20 was such a common number to use in their calculations that I'm surprised they stopped at 13 and didn't go to 20. But the new calendar the people from Boston University have discovered only goes to 17. What they found was actually a calendar. We found lots of dates, but the only calendars have been in the one of the 4 books that survived, the Dresden Codex. So it stopped at 13, and other dates stopped at 13, but they're only dates, not calendar calculations. So the Dresden Codex and the Sheltoon calendars are actually active calendars where calculations are made that predict the future of time.
So based on your research, because there's a lot of claims, and I don't mean to get off on this whole 2012 thing, but, you're a Maya expert, so we're just going to pick your brain here a little bit. Based on your research, what did the Maya say was going to happen, or do you have any insights as to what they said regarding, and I'll buy into the December 21st, even though I don't believe that date, 2012 date. But what do they say is going to happen? And I'll say when the current cycle comes to an end.
You realize that only one monument, one stele, and it was broken at a place called Tortuguero near Chiapas, Mexico. There's only one place in all of the Maya hieroglyphics where that date is given as the end date. Everywhere else, it's just a date, not a calendar. Everywhere else, it's not even mentioned. And we're talking about 40 to 50,000 carved monuments. So it's found in one place. And there's other monuments like at Palenque, the tomb of Bacal, the great king, he's in something called the Temple of the Inscriptions. There's an inscription there that takes us well past our date here and goes to the year 4,772. So that's way beyond 21st of December. So we got one that goes beyond 21st of December. We got one that stops on December 21st, and we have nothing else. So if that was such a big deal and the end was coming, mathematically, I would say it would be on some of the other 40 to 50,000 monuments throughout the Maya world. But it's only found in one.
Well, and I after a lot of digging, I found what the inscription said, which wasn't a whole lot.
What?
And I was,
A god so-and-so, and I can't remember his name now, he's a minor god, will come down and get dressed. That's it.
Well,
and then the rest is broken off.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, okay, well, I don't know if I should be scared by that.
Well, the Maya interpreted. Today's Maya still carry on the calendar. I'm talking about the shamans, the priests. Don't have nothing in their customs or their lore or their culture that says this is the end of the world. It's the beginning of another era, just like we had Y2K. Remember back then, everybody was afraid of the computers turning over and wrecking airplanes and everything you could dream of was going to happen at the turn of the millennium, and everybody had an idea of if it was a good or a bad thing. So what happened was we had another New Year's Day, and it was nice, and I was in Mexico actually, sort of welcoming in the new millennium. It's just like December 21st. The worst fear you have is that you only have 4 more shopping days till Christmas.
Well, and I'll just put this out to the people that are listening to the show today. So this show airs live on December 21st, 2012. But there are the people that say, well, it's going to happen at 11:11. Well, we're after 11:11, in the morning. And so we're doing a show, and we're calling it, What Were You Doing When the World Was Coming to an End? And then we're making it a call-in show, and we just want to have a lot of fun because, obviously, if we're airing the show, we're not dead. So that's a good thing. So that was just a little pitch for that. Something I find interesting, Jim, is the start date. The planting of the 3 hearth stone myth that is associated with the start date, and then other cultures around the world that also have the beginning of a new cycle or a creation date that, it's not the same day, but it's kind of in that same general time period. And I just find that compelling that something happened. I don't know what. Haven't figured that out yet. That's like another research project. Haven't figured that one out yet. But that something happened. Do you have any insight what the Maya say? What the descendants believe happened, on that August 14, 3114 BC? No, well, nobody was around. It was a long time ago. That predates the Egyptians. That predates all the what we call civilizations. So I have a mathematic and astronomical reason for that date. As you know, the Maya worship time, and they were obsessed with time. They didn't worship it. The study of time and space, and the way they calculated time, was not a religion, but it was a belief system that drove their sciences, it drove their technology. So they believed in a past, present, and future of time as undifferentiated time. And they believed in linear time, which is like from today to tomorrow is 24 hours. They also believed in cyclic time, is like a history repeating itself. That way they could remember the future and anticipate the past. I've always liked that. But they... I think it's backwards, but that's okay. We're dyslexic on this show.
Are.
We got to...
You can't look in the past, but you've been to the future. But they did this because they cycled time. They would, like, for instance, I'm going to get to the point in a minute here, okay?
Okay.
When they wanted to define a point in time, they had divided the cosmos into 4 planes, horizontal planes. And so we had 4 parts to the cosmos. And that's why they call their belief system the quadripartite cosmic philosophy. And so when they had a calculation of time, they used 4 dimensions. The X, Y, and Z that one would use in an algebraic calculation of a 3-dimensional body, plus T for time. So that's how they calculated their time. And the closest thing we have to it, which is really a thought process, is the space-time continuum. That's exactly the way physicists calculate time in space, with the 3 dimensions and time as the 4th element. So, with that in mind, so here we are, Dr. Rita. We're 2 astronomers down around, let's say we're around 200 years BC. And we finally calculate that the precession of the Earth takes 25,600 years, give or take. and we divided it into 5 parts, 5,123 years and 28 days, I think, 128 days. And we're looking at each other and say, well, when did this start? We don't know, because that was a long time ago. Well, let's do this. Let's split it in half, and we'll go forward to a time that there was really an important time. So they picked. Now, I didn't get buy into this stuff at the beginning, and this is true. They picked a time when the Milky Way, the dark rift in the Milky Way, would be at the zenith. And they looked for a year when that would come around December 21st, which is what they found now. They could do that, and they were really great astronomers. They picked this year, and they picked December 21st, which is a holiday in every religion in the world, as you know. You know, it's Hanukkah, it's Christmas, it's everything else. Well, right around there anyway. And then they said, okay, that's the end. Let's go back, and then they recycled back in time to BC 3114 on August the 14th. You say the 11:11? I thought it was the afternoon. Nobody really knows what the actual time is, but it's that day.
Well, I know. It just makes me laugh when people are like, yeah, and it's going to happen at 11:11. And I'm like, okay, who made that up? But
well, you had to do something. But anyway, that's a logical astronomical mathematical procedure, and they wanted to, at the end, because they had the choice of picking the end on some really special day, and that the stars are right, and the sun was right, and the holiday was right, so that's how they picked it.
It all worked.
That's the way I could figure it.
It blended.
And you see, this is not a religion. In my book, if you've had a chance to read it yet, I say at the very beginning, this is not about rituals, not about matriarchy, it's not about, kings and queens. This is about science and technology. And their belief system in this quadripartite cosmic philosophy was not religion, but they did use the time to set religious holidays and to set rites for the coronations and maybe even the start of war. Venus was very, very popular for picking those times, but this was a belief system. I know it's hard to tell the difference between a religion and a belief system, but this was like us believing in E is equal to MC squared, or the theory of plate tectonics. So it was an important, very important part of the life. And time was everything. Time set all the standards for the Maya.
Let's shift gears here, because I have some other things I wanted to talk about with you.
Okay.
One of the things that the Maya brought to the table was a fully developed script, which in the New World, in the Americas, it was the only place that we know of that had a written language. When you look at Maya script and compare it to other, and I'm going to say pictorial written languages, whether we're talking about Egyptian hieroglyphics or Chinese, whatever their symbols are called. I guess I'll have to look that one up. How does it compare? I mean, are we talking that maybe it's a derivation of some other system?
You picked three, by naming those three languages, 3 of the 5 original languages in the world. The other one is Aramaic, or the Semitic language of the Middle East, and the Indus River language, which has not been deciphered yet. So that's the 4, and there even some scholars are saying it's one of the original 2 languages, because they were completely isolated. They didn't have any support from other civilizations for reading and writing and arithmetic, etc. They had to do all this on their own, and they did it based on this belief system of, the astronomy and the math, and the writing came out of the need to keep records. And so they developed what is between 600 to 800 different characters, which is not as easy as, say, our alphabet. But they did not just have pictograms. They had logograms, which is vowels and sounding and tenses in the language. So it was so sophisticated that you could have written, one wag said, you could have written Gone with the Wind with this book and been pretty close to the actual translation. So where did they get it from? And I'm going back to that. You're right. Somewhere around 32 B.C., the first hieroglyphics are found. And there appear to be, they were painted on a wall in a cave. And not that they had to be on a cave, because there were already great cities the Mayans had built at that time. They call them pre-classic, but they were still big temples and big pyramids and big everything you can imagine, palaces and everything. But they have this line in the sand they draw at 250 A.D., which they say is the beginning of the classic. But that is one of my mysteries, is how in the world they suddenly come up with this really complex, really accurate, complete written language at about the time of Christ. But they don't have any examples that, like trial and error or something like that we might have found with an earlier section of this culture. They just sort of appeared out of nowhere, and it was fully formed, as you said. And nobody's going to answer that one.
Well, and it doesn't seem, when you look at it, it doesn't seem like writing. It doesn't seem like a script. It looks like pictures. Where the Egyptian stuff, it's pictures, but they also had kind of a shorthand form of writing that they used.
Yeah.
When you look at the Maya stuff, and I'm like, could you imagine having to write all that stuff out, and it would just take forever to write anything?
They did it on, thank goodness they did it on their stone monuments, but we wouldn't have anything. There were thousands of books about astronomy and medicine and natural history and history itself. And the priests who were part of the conquest read a lot of these and started getting into them before they burned all the books. And in their chronicles, they talk about the books and how the history went back 800 years or 1,000 years, and it was all about a whole variety of subjects on science, etc. Didn't have any novels that they mentioned, but it had most of the books were based on scientific subjects, and it went back. And the ones they found in 1500 when they invaded were all copies, because these are on bark paper, and even our best paper these days doesn't last 600 years, particularly in a climate that's as humid as the Yucatan. So they, I don't know how they did it, but there's one thing that is really important. There was 50 city-states. These were the independent states. Their independence is one of the things that kept them going so long, because there was not one big city head of the empire like Rome or Tenochtitlan or the other cities in the north, like Teotihuacan, but they were all independent, and they balanced out the power, and the cities were all centers of commerce. They were centers of incubators of science, etc. But all the writing throughout the whole Maya world was all in the same language. It was either in Chantal, which is it's like us, okay? During the Dark Ages, Middle Ages, there was only one language that was written. That was Latin. And it wasn't for those little monks, transcribing and copying the books, the manuscripts. Very little would have, survived. And the same thing happened with the Maya. They copied the books by hand, just like the monks did. But the thing is, they were all the same. And even when you go back to early, and I'm not an epigrapher. I do not read very well, but read script that well. It's very similar all the way back. There were very little changes. There were changes In fact, one figure may have as many as 5 different variants. You say, oh, how could I read it? Well, it's like you looking at a script on your computer and reviewing the crazy figure configurations of the letters we have, from German to Gothic to you name something. Okay, we do the same thing, but we are able to make out the letter because there's a basic pattern we have in our mind. And the same thing happened with the Maya. They would have a figure that would have variations on it, but there would always be a real telltale pattern within that particular glyph, if that makes any sense. But
yeah, I mean, so basically,
you may not know about.
they
I was amazed.
Go ahead.
I'd say I was amazed when these guys could read this. I'm watching these really good epigraphers like Mark Van Stone and David Houston and David Stewart. Just read these things like I would used to read the backs of a box of Wheaties when I had breakfast. Kids, right? But they're unbelievable. They're really great guys, and it's a very difficult language to read. And as you know, the breakthrough just came in the 1960s when they broke the code. And it was done behind the Iron Curtain by one man all by himself. It's amazing.
Wow.
Did I help with that question? The answer is I sort of rattled.
No. It was good, and I had a follow-up question, and it just totally left my brain. So I'm sure it will.
You mean
come back.
What did I come in this room for?
No. Oh, I know. No, it was actually more of a comment. I just think it saddens me. How's that? It saddens me that the Spanish did what they did when they came to the Americas and burned all the books. And it reminds me, and actually, I guess time-wise it wasn't, but it reminds me the loss that we experienced when the Library of Alexandria burned. Could you imagine if the documents that were in the Library of Alexandria were still in existence? The level of knowledge and insights we would have had into the Western past, kind of like the knowledge and insights we would have into the Mayan past that would have been preserved?
I'm a great believer in more knowledge has been forgotten than we have. It's got to be a sort of division. It's got to be something more in the way of thoughts than in how to make a jet engine or a rocket or build a satellite. But it's the thought. The basis of all these inventions we have were considered in the library, the scrolls that were in the library at Alexandria. And here's another, it was so close, people don't realize that when the Spanish invaded the Yucatan, they rolled over didn't roll over they got driven away twice, but they came back in, they controlled the northern Yucatan in 1542. It was 157 years later before they overcame and conquered the last Maya city, stronghold, in Tayasil. It's in an island near Tikal, and they actually surrendered before they were massacred by the Spanish. And remember, it's about 1700. It's about 75 years before we became a country. That's how close we were to our history to the last Maya going down and having their books burned. There were still literate people and literate priests and academic people in the Maya assemblage there that could read the books and could copy the books and could change the books. And they did continue writing the books, extending the history, and it would modify the almanacs of the sun eclipses and the moon eclipses, etc. So it wasn't so long ago.
All right, we have 10 minutes left, and I have a big topic that I want to cover kind of briefly. So I'm going to throw out two questions that are kind of unrelated. but I'm just going to put them out there because of our finite time, but they're related. So the first question is, how does the architecture of the Maya compare to that of Egypt or even the Inca of South America? Okay, that's one question. And then, is it true that the Maya built structures upon older structures? And has anybody looked at the date of the oldest structure that was Maya built? I'm sorry.
I'll take the first one first.
Okay, no.
Maya art and its style is otherworldly. It's got a grace and ease. Even the characters that they draw have a flow to them that are completely different than the Egyptian or the Peruvian. And the Peruvian, actually, they didn't have great architecture. They had the beautiful site of Machu Picchu, but those buildings were basically stone walls with wooden roofs. They had a system of communication that was a series of tied knots. They didn't have mathematics, and they didn't have a written language. I don't know about their completely about their astronomy, but they had big buildings they built and with unbelievably close-fitting stones. But their art was basically the most of the art was in pottery, in ceramics, and that was unbelievable. And I would say that they would be parallel with the Maya pieces in their configuration and representation of the animal or the person that was depicted on that vase. Like in the Incas, they have the stirrups on top of the pots and the person's face on the front. It's unbelievable. As far as Egyptians go, they were really big on three-dimensional figures that were absolutely symmetrical to each other. It's unbelievable they could do that with hand tools. They only had copper tools, or not bronze tools. But they only had a few pyramids. Maya have hundreds of pyramids. You're probably aware of that. But the architecture of the Maya was always co-constructed and co-designed with the sculpture on the outside. The sculpture and the architecture were one, and the architecture became part of the sculpture, and that's why we have such beautiful buildings that flow so well. And each area of the Maya zone had its own regional style. In Egypt, they only had one basic style, okay? But and here's a real important difference. The Inca and the Aztecs did not have the technology of the Maya. They did not know how to make cement. Maya made cement, and then they made cast-in-place concrete buildings out of it. Their buildings would rise to, multi-story buildings would rise to 5 or 7 stories up vertically, and then they would live in these. Their pyramids rose to be 270 feet. But somebody said, well, that's not a high-rise. Well, any building with a structure on top of it that has a function, like a temple, I consider that to be a high-rise. Unlike the Egyptians, who built big four-sided pyramids, they were different. But the Maya built their buildings out of concrete, and the architecture and art were integrated within that capability. And the last question was?
I'll repeat it. Is it true that the Maya built structures upon older structures, and has anyone been able to date the antiquity of the oldest underlying structure?
Yes. At several sites, Chichen Itza is one of them, at Uxmal and at Tikal. Other kings came along and built a pyramid, a small one. The next king came along, wanted to outdo him, so he built another structure on top of the other pyramid, so it grew higher. And in many cases, there were 3 different buildings. So you had 1, 2, 3 layers of pyramid, which had a temple on top. But generally, the Maya preserved the first temple, the second temple, it was buried. They'd cover it up with soil or concrete or something like that, and they would preserve it. Now, they've gone back, I think the oldest is, I can't think if it's at El Mirador or at Chichen Itza, where there's a really old, Copan. Copan's got the really old, see, nobody's ever asked me this question before. It's a good question. That dated back to the pre-classic period, and it would be before 250 BC, AD rather. So that would take it back a long time. But that nobody's ever asked me that question. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, they have dated them, and it's true that they did build one on top of the other.
Well, they say that the hallmark of civilization is building, I don't want to say megalithic structures, but building big structures and having a form of writing and having cities, and a level of culture. And it sounds like, let me phrase it differently. When you listen to historians, they pretty much negate the Maya except for when they're really in more contemporary times and don't validate that this early culture that you're talking about that built these smaller pyramids were really a culture. They were just these primitive people living in the forest.
Well, those early pyramids had wonderful carvings on them. They used cast-in-place concrete to build them and cast-in-place concrete to build palaces and temples 300 years before Christ. That's a long time back. So they actually had this technology that they use, and it would extend it back, 300, 400 years BC to build these structures.
It would just be so interesting if they were able to, peel back the layers to look at the carvings that are on the outside, or to really investigate, if they're still painted or just, because what we have now are, pretty washed away,
yes.
and have experienced a lot of erosion, just because of that environment.
The environment is horrible. It's a jungle environment. It's been 1,200 years, which is, look back in European history that far. You're back at 1000 AD. But one thing I want to point out about civilization, archaeologists still consider the Maya to be Stone Age because they didn't have metal tools. They had higher mathematics, they had astronomy, they had writing, they had unbelievable architecture and structure and great technology, but they didn't see any metal, so they named them Stone Age. However, there are, and you hit it right on the head, V. Gordon Childe, since Chapter 4, had a definition of civilization which didn't involve metal. And the Maya answered all the questions that you named a few yourself, like a civic government, or writing, a centered power, public works, and a whole series of items which the Maya had, and this real deep thinker thought civilization it should have, not just a tool, not just a weapon, but he thought there was a much deeper and important elements to have. And it's in Chapter 4 if you get a chance to read that.
And that would be in The Lost Secrets of Maya Technology.
That's my book. That's exactly right. And you can see I do take issue with archaeology for that, because
we take issue with archaeology on this show all the time, so that's why I like having people like you on.
Right, and I had 4 famous archaeologists review the book. I couldn't believe that they were going to do it for me, because I'm not an archaeologist. And they reviewed it, and they all liked it, and only one said, only the old-timers call the Maya Stone Age. I said, your son did.
Oops.
I won't tell you his name is, but anyway, that's why I left that message right there, because I asked a lot of archaeologists, have you ever heard of V. Gordon Childe? I learned that, believe it or not, in an Indiana Jones movie. Dr. Jones answered a question to a student, and I looked it up, and sure enough, that man was the guy that came up with the alternate concepts of civilization. He was brilliant before he jumped off a cliff, but that was 50 years ago. So anyway, there is other descriptions and definitions of civilizations that don't go to the the three different types of tools or weapons that were used that were originally used to curate tools in a Danish museum around 1810, and it still sticks. It shows you what you got to watch out what you write down, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, 2 points. One, you don't have to have a metal tool to kill somebody. A sharp stick, or a nice heavy club works just as well. But didn't the Maya work with gold? I mean, I know the Inca were well known for their gold and their gold work. The Maya didn't work with precious metals?
We didn't have any. That's part of our heritage. Yeah. That's America, okay? They didn't have any metals at all. The closest iron was 1,500 miles to the north, which is way out of the zone in those days. And they didn't have any gold within their realm. They did trade for it, but they did have the largest deposits of jadeite in the world. Jadeite is a material that is harder than steel, and they made tools out of jadeite, not the variable kind. They didn't, not the blue and not the green, but black jadeite called chloromengalite, where iron takes the place of aluminum in the process of making this dark metal, this dark jadeite, and they use the black or dark gray material for tools, and the book's full of pictures of them. And archaeologists do. Cassini said, I didn't know those were tools. Well, there's chisels and there's aws and there's gouges, and I can go on of all sizes and types, axes, adzes. All the tools in your modern toolbox are in the Maya toolbox of jade. So that's how they worked these hard. You see a beautiful Maya sculpture. They couldn't have done that with wooden mallets and pieces of flint or chert. They needed something hard and substantial, and that's what they used with these wonderful chisels and stuff. But the archaeologists overlooked it until this book. This is the first book which has got photographs and explanations of how they worked.
All right, one last question, then we're going to have to wrap. But when they did these carvings, I mean, I know I've been to Chichen Itza and Uxmal and just in that general area, and the reliefs that are on the buildings are so intricate. I mean, they're kind of overwhelming in their design. What kind of material is that? I mean, is it a hard stone or is it a fairly, at the time that I went, I never thought about it, and I just figured it was a soft stone, not limestone, but something fairly soft and easy to carve. But is it?
Well, there's all kinds of limestone. Some of it is sort of soft when you dig it up, but after a couple days, it hardens. Some of it is hard when you dig it up. So they used a hard limestone to build with. Even if it was soft when it came out, it's like cement. Concrete. It'll harden in a couple of days. So you look at one of those really fine carvings, you couldn't do those in a couple of days. It would have taken, in fact, if you did use soft material, you couldn't have gotten those fine chiseled lines that you saw defining the outline of the figures or the, I can't, I don't know. Let's take the ball carve. We saw all these ball players in a large array of different positions. They were all cut into the limestone, either in place or nearby, using the jadeite chisels, gouges, and aws that you see in the book.
And all the skulls. Don't forget the skulls. They got skulls everywhere.
The Tabuzantul, that always gives me the creeps. But there's a good story in the book about the next structure over. It's called the platform of Venus. That's I think that was a water purification plant at one time before it was changed into a platform. But that's another story. It's in the book if you want to look at it.
And your book, I'm assuming, Amazon.com, your local bookstore, if they want to get a copy?
Yes, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and my website, which is theoldexplorer.com, has got connections to all of them. And enough that you may not want to read the book after you read my website, because it's got a great outline of the whole thing, all the great inventions.
No, buy the book. Makes you money.
Yes, buy a book.
Okay, Jim, I got to go. Thank you for coming on, and we'll
Rita,
talk again
I hope I
soon.
answered some of your questions.
You did. Again, thank you.
All righty.
That's James O'Con, his book, The Lost Secrets of Mayan Technology. Next week, we're going to have David Feinstein talking about ethics for energy healing practitioners, and Vaughn Krashler talking about the secrets of time travel. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita.